So let's now have a look at the key concepts of markers, the input type and the pose. So per default, the first selected control will be set to an input type of kinematic. And kinematic just means animated. It will follow animation to 100%. It won't respond to gravity or contacts or anything like that. The next control and all subsequent controls will have an input type of inherit. And inherit means that it will just do whatever the group is doing. And the group is this node right here. And the group is set to an input type of pose. And pose means that it will follow whatever the pose of the character is. So if I were to say input type off, then it will only look at the start position and then ignore whatever the pose is doing from then on. And like I mentioned, the subsequent controllers will have an input type of inherit. So if the group is set to off, then all of these controllers will also be set to off. But you can override individual controls. So let's set the upper arm to an input type of pose. And so now the upper arm will follow the pose, but the lower arm will not. And likewise, we can set the hand to an input type of pose. And so now the hand will follow the pose, and the upper arm will follow the pose, but the elbow will just be will just hang free. And this brings me to the second concept, the pose space. At the moment, the pose is being followed in local space. However, there's also a pose space of world. But if I say that I want the hand to follow the animation in world space, then I can say pose space world. And so now the hand would match the world space position and orientation of the hand rather than the local space. This can be made more obvious if I set the upper arm to off as well, or inherit, because the group is off. So now only the hand is following the simulation in world space. To give you a more concrete example of what that can look like on a more complete character, here you can see that it starts out in the correct relative pose. And in fact, I can make this a bit stronger so it follows the pose more closely. But you can see that even though our character is rotating around in world space, that's not really being translated into our simulation, because the relative poses are still holding. For example, if I were to have this arm raised at this point, then I can have the relative arm also be raised. So now if I set the group from local to world, we'll see the difference. Right, so now everything is being followed in world space instead of local space. And then we can also play with things like the stiffness. If you have a low stiffness but it's in world space, you'll get a more offset looking behavior. Let's make it even lower to really drive home the point. There we go. So I can see that he's following it in world space, but now gravity is quite strong, so he's still being pulled down by gravity. He's not quite reaching this world space position.